Hello everyone and welcome back to Bandits Ballads. It's been a while, huh? I kinda got lost in the forest for about a month, but now that I found my way back to Calradia, it's time for Balon's adventures to continue, however, not without a quick recap of the events thus far. You already know what Balon went through during the first few episodes, but lately, he's made quite a name for himself. He raided hundreds of caravans, defeated countless lords, caused thousands of deaths, convinced most factions to pay him tribute in exchange for not setting their lands on fire, and even managed to get married to a nice Sturgian princess. And now, Milady's father is in trouble. His army has been attacked by a larger Imperial force, and if I leave him on his own to pursue my own objectives, he might get himself captured, or worse. So without a hint of hesitation, I hurried towards the battle and entered the fray with a handful of my men. The rest would stand back until they're absolutely needed. I'd rather not risk their lives for a battle that isn't even theirs. Because of that, there's not much to be said about my tactical involvement in this fight. I simply ordered the few lads that came with me to get in range so that the archers can fire upon the foe and steal a few kills while the others protect them. And since I didn't need to bark out any orders, I could just focus on taking down as many enemies as possible. If I were to sum it up in 5 seconds, I'd simply tell you that during this fight, all I've done was ride around and kill folk, but you're not here for a summary execution, so I'll share with you some of the highlights of this battle. When the engagement began, the first thing I've done was pull out my harpoons and start chucking. The first one hit a horseman behind my intended target, the second completely missed, and the next 3 instantly killed some elite soldiers who got a stroke of bad luck. Imagine training for years and buying good gear, only to have your life snuffed out by a mounted javelineer who doesn't even look where he throws his projectiles. After claiming those lives, I threw another spear at a lord that dared to take important space in my field of vision, but his chainmail saved him for an entire 4 seconds, until I threw my last one. I later learned that he was none other than Arion, son of the Northern Emperor himself. Not long after, I had a brief but indecisive duel with Manteos, where none of us could hit the other. His mace couldn't reach my head and my spear couldn't breach his shield, but our little dance was quickly interrupted by a contingent of charging cavalry who gave me a scratch and forced me to flee. A little while later, I saw a group of mounted Sturgians fighting some Imperial horsemen, so I joined in to give them a hand, claiming a cataphract as my prisoner in the process. Among those horsemen, I fought a few more lords as well, such as Theavisos, who fell from his saddle after I repeatedly and painstakingly hit him over and over and over again. This was more mentally scarring for me than physically traumatizing for him. But the following duel with Morencios was an even more grueling process which took much longer. These guys love using their shields to delay their demise, and the armor they wear turns my mighty strikes into mere glancing blows, but with enough persistence, even the nobility can be defeated. After this, not much happened on my end. The Sturgians pushed, their front line crumbled, and the battle lines shifted a little, but the Imperials' success was short-lived, because their newfound confidence pushed them to repeat the Sturgians' mistakes, and this time, my allies were reinforced with fresh troops. When the Imperial infantry was eradicated, the few remaining archers attempted to execute a tactical retreat towards their reinforcements. But I couldn't let that happen, so I stabbed them in the back, or rather, sliced them. Technical details, not that important. It didn't take long for the survivors to reunite with their brethren, which eventually forced me to turn around and run back to my allies, who were closing in. This was it, the final push of the Sturgians. I allowed them to deal with the bulk of the enemy forces while I'd take care of any stragglers with the help of my 4 horsemen, who recently joined the fray. I may not have claimed all the kills, but the teamwork we displayed was far more enjoyable. After a couple more minutes, all that was left to do was clean up. As the enemy retreated, I tried my best to increase my kill count, as that would lead to a greater reward when we divvy up the loot. Nothing special about striking down fleeing enemies, but there was something special in seeing a familiar banner standing abandoned in the field after its bearer has been slain. I didn't realize Gifor, my arch-nemesis himself, took part in this battle. It's good to know I played a crucial part in his defeat, I have to admit. I did feel a bit of regret for not killing him when I had the chance, but repeated humiliations like this make my choice of revenge that much sweeter. But back to the topic at hand. As a token of gratitude for my contributions in this battle, I was entitled to 5% of the loot, which I estimate to be worth about 10 to 15,000 dinars. Not that I need to keep track of money anymore. As long as I fight, I have a guaranteed income stream. But even better than the loot was seeing Zvana smile, knowing that her father has been saved from death or imprisonment, because let's be honest, the Sturgians would have surely lost that battle. My involvement may seem insignificant, but the 200 men I had in reserve prevented the Imperials from overwhelming Godun's army on the field. However, all choices have consequences, and the consequence of me stopping by to help my father-in-law was that I could no longer take his former castle for myself like I was initially planning, because the Sturgians were reclaiming it for themselves. With no other options, I went back into Empire territory to look for a poorly defended fortress that my small army could realistically capture. Siratos has seen a lot of conflict recently, so it probably fits the bill. Before making my siege preparations, however, I had to clear out a nearby Imperial army. Only one party here at the moment, but if I left it unattended, more enemies would have gathered, and with strength in numbers, they could come to the defense of their castle. Can't allow that to happen. In all honesty, this wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. No tactics were needed, because not only was my enemy outnumbered, but also severely outmatched. They brought peasants and poorly trained recruits into a fight against hardened criminals, and because I knew this would be easy, I actually dismounted and fought the enemy on foot. My sword made short work of them, and when I was done slicing and dicing, I noticed Susada riding away on her armored horse. Because I wanted to claim her, I stole whichever mount was closest and caught up to her, and she received a free acupuncture treatment, courtesy of Zvana's lance. With the leader taken care of, all that was left to do was make this cataphract change his mind about continuing to fight us. And so, with very little effort, we've removed a small problem that had the potential of growing into a very big problem. With Susada's prowling army out of the picture, I was now free to attack the Imperial fort. So I began building my siege camp and all the additional engines of war that are needed to conquer this castle. Siege towers, a battering ram, and a variety of projectile launchers. This was a lengthy and arduous process which took us 9 days to complete. Mainly because I forgot to appoint Joron the Scholar as chief engineer and organized everything myself. During this time I came close to being attacked by Penton's army of 250 men, but what goes around comes around. Godun's far larger army scared them off, and I could conduct my operations in relative peace. Throughout this process I also noticed a couple of Kuzeyat lords who came by and started watching us from a safe distance, but lacked the courage to attack us outright. Too afraid of my elite soldiers, I suppose. When everything was ready, I deployed my siege weapons and prepared to storm the castle. I have no experience in commanding a siege, so this time I allowed the sergeants to make their own decisions while I would try to operate the ballista and shoot the defenders of the walls. That didn't go well for me. I missed my first shot since, you know, I'm still getting used to the damn thing. And before I could calibrate my next shot, I caught a glimpse of an oil pot flying right towards me. My sharp instincts allowed me to get out of its way mere moments before it landed on the ballista. I doubted I could dodge the next one, so I left the bolt thrower to my men, intending to follow a siege tower and scale the walls once it makes contact. Soon as I got behind the left tower, I noticed the one on the right getting pulverized by a catapult. Not surprising, since I designed it myself, and I have zero knowledge of engineering. And not even 10 seconds later, the second siege tower collapsed as well, so all we had now was the battering ram. It's still a reliable way in, albeit a bit slow, as long as it doesn't get destroyed before breaching the main gate. However, I have no idea what happened, but suddenly my men started running away. Were they regrouping? Retreating? While I was trying to process what the hell was happening, I got onto the battering ram and started pushing it myself at a snail's pace, but after seeing no progress, I commanded my men to get back to the fight. While waiting for them, I kept pushing the ram, but that was cut short when a mangonel's payload landed on top of the battering ram, which caused the plank to dislodge and fall on my head. When I came to my senses, I was back in the siege camp with my doctor nursing my wounds, but in the distance, the two Khuzait banners were slowly making their approach. They weren't afraid of my men, they were scared of me, and now that I'm temporarily unable to lead the troops, they see an opportunity to easily wipe us out, and since we were disorganized, we couldn't run away either, so they eventually caught us. If I was in a fighting condition, I'd have easily killed half of them myself, but in this situation I only had two options. Send all of my men to their deaths and lose everything I've built thus far, or send a few of my soldiers as a distraction so that the rest of us can make our escape. 26 men and a large chunk of loot is a far smaller sacrifice than everything. But even worse than losing my men and my riches is tarnishing my reputation. If I keep having to make these decisions, I'll be known across the land as Balon the Coward. Actually, I think there's an easy way to rectify that, but still, I'm mad about having to sacrifice my soldiers. But that was objectively the right decision, because in the confusion, my party picked up the pace and we were able to outrun our pursuers through the forest. They didn't give up easily, but when we arrived in the Sturgeon-controlled town of Umbrella, they had no choice but to walk away. And since we're all wounded and weary, I rented lodgings for a few days, so that we may recover. According to Dr. Vara, I should be back at full strength in less than a week, if I stay put in a comfortable bed. And since we had nothing better to do, Svana took it upon herself to heal my emotional damage in a way that only a woman knows how.
I enjoyed our game. Let's play again later.
During our short stay here, we noticed she gained a bit of weight, which is strange, since we didn't eat any more than usual. While we were resting in town, we could faintly hear the sound of thudding, screams, and crashing metal coming from a nearby fortress that was being besieged. Shortly after the noises stopped, we heard news that Lochana Castle was reclaimed by the Northern Empire, which presented me with a new opportunity to take a fief for myself. But I wasn't feeling 100% up to it, so I spent a few more days in town and decided to go for a leisurely stroll through the streets of Umbrella. As I walk, I tend to get lost deep into my thoughts, and I only came back to reality after taking a wrong turn and ending up in a shady alleyway, surrounded by thugs. My instincts told me to walk away, but then I remembered the lesson that Tiny Lek taught me not too long ago. So I had a little chat with these thugs and they acted all tough, which quite frankly irritated me. After a stern talking to, the gangers drew their weapons and attempted to strike me down, but with the help of my doctor, we anesthetized these boys and decided to take this street for ourselves. A skilled rogue companion could be installed here as a local crime boss, so naturally, I tried to appoint Athrar the Prince to this position, since he's the most experienced. Unfortunately, he lacks the ruthlessness needed to rule the streets, so in his stead, I designated Pissman himself to take over, along with some of the lads who grew weary of the life of war we've been living thus far. To be entirely honest, this is far less profitable than I was expecting, but at the very least, I can regularly recruit bandits and other unsavory individuals by just talking to my companion every time I visit town. Now, in order to expand my operations, I would need to employ more merciless rogues into my gang, so I asked the innkeeper if he knows of any such individuals. Other than my own guy? Nope. With that done, I felt that the time was right to march my army to Lochana and finally conquer my first castle, but all of a sudden, I changed my mind because my party was not at full force. So instead, we went back into Sturgia to replenish our troops. I would have preferred to add some raiders to my ranks, but since I didn't find any, the local volunteers would have to suffice. When we were back at full strength, I set course back to Lochana, but in my path, I noticed an Imperial army marching towards Urixkala, so I thought to myself, if I patiently wait for this siege to unfold, perhaps the Imperials will succeed, but have their army weakened by the defenders, which will allow me to wipe them out and quickly take the castle for myself. While waiting, the army suddenly did get weaker because one of the stupid mercs who fought for the Empire suddenly changed his allegiance to the Aserai and walked away from his former employers. Dumbass was disorganized, so I swiftly punished him for his disloyalty. Should have picked a faction that wasn't at war with me. Even so, I would still have to wait for the Imperial army to dwindle to manageable levels. To pass the time, I recruited more village volunteers, went to the shooting range to train my crossbow skill, and even got a messenger from Umbrella telling me my street is going to be attacked by a rival gang. That will have to wait. I have bigger fish to fry right now. Never mind, the Sturgians came to the defense of their castle before the imps conquered it. Oh well, back to my initial plan of attacking the fortress of Lochana, but not before teaching the gangs of Umbrella to stay in their lane. When we arrived to our destination, I ordered the construction of my siege camp and all the other necessary equipment for the assault, this time with a proper engineer overseeing the operations. Unfortunately, before I even built the basic camp, my scouts alerted me to an approaching army of about 1,000 men being led by none other than the Northern Emperor himself. All I could hope for is that we'd be able to finish the basic preparations and launch a bare-bones attack on the fortress before the army catches us with our pants down. Preferably, we'd also get this done during the day. I hate fighting in the dark. When dawn broke, I ordered the assault to begin, because if we don't take the castle, we're finished. So I commanded everyone to move to the left side of the walls, because we'll be executing a concentrated attack, and as soon as the ladders were in position, I was the first to climb. If I'm skilled enough, I can fight my way to the main gate and open it for my men, because it's a lot better than having them climb ladders. Unfortunately, after killing a couple of militiamen, I got attacked not by one, but by two actual soldiers, one of whom had an axe, which could break my shield in 10 seconds. But I panicked, so I didn't even last that long. The reason they got the drop on me is because their shields were dirty, almost entirely black, so I was under the misconception that those were my men. In retrospect, my soldiers simply couldn't have caught up with me that fast, but oh well, live and learn, I guess. What followed after was a lot of pain for my warriors. They attempted to scale the ladders, but they couldn't manage to deal any damage to the defenders. It was not all in vain, however. While the imps focused on defending their right wall, a group of my elite warriors snuck around to the other side, where there was no opposition. After about a minute, enough of them congregated into a sizable force that was ready to go on the offensive, and when they did, they swept across the castle like a ravaging storm, killing everyone in their path. And that was the end of the defenders. I haven't seen that happen myself. I'm merely relaying information that was passed down to me as I awoke from the coma, with the good doctor taking care of my wounds. When I asked the sergeant who led the men after I fell, why did he risk his life to press forward instead of retreating, he said he simply followed my example. Go forth without fear. Worst that can happen is you die. Besides, the lads really wanted to see me crowned king after all the victories I've given them and the riches they have gathered. What riches, you may ask? You always take everything, you might wrongly assume. Really? I've personally killed dozens of Imperial cataphracts, yet all I've ever gotten was one helmet. Who do you think claimed the rest of that expensive gear? That's right, my soldiers did. Then fenced it off for a fraction of its cost, so they can afford a full set of second-hand armor for themselves and send some money back home to their families. Of course they'd show a bit of gratitude to the man who allowed them to live like royalty, because if I can accomplish all that I have without a crown, then think of what I can achieve once I'm recognized as king. Soon as I was well enough to walk, I appointed my dear wife to be the governor of this castle and then paid her a visit in the Lord's Hall. She is a bit more knowledgeable in regards to the laws and customs of this land, and while my injuries were being tended, she put together the paperwork necessary to create an upstart kingdom. The Ironborn. Long may we reign. After getting together for an emergency meeting in the war room to discuss our plans for the future, it was time to pack up and leave before the 1,000 Imperials surround us. No way we can fight them. Not now. This castle has served its purpose, so I had Svanna abandon her position as governor and then left in a hurry. Now, my party was still disorganized, but if I wasn't 100% sure I could outrun the imps, I would have simply waited for them to commence their siege and sacrificed a few of my men to fight our way out to safety. Fortunately, my scouts reported that even in our disorganized state, we're still faster than the approaching army, so we simply left Locana to the Imperials. A monarch doesn't need a castle, his kingdom exists wherever he goes. I shall be nomadic for a while, until I build up a sizable force that can take Makeb from the Khuzaits and then defend it against invaders. As I walked away from my besieged fief, I noticed a small gang of mercs raiding a village that was technically mine, and because I caught them unprepared, they couldn't just run away, so I killed them all. When I was done with them, I spotted another mercenary from the same company trying to do the same thing, so he and his men met the same fate. And not only did I get some valuable loot out of them, but also rescued over a dozen veterans from imprisonment, and they subsequently joined my party. Looks like villages are a really valuable asset, if for no other reason. It's because they make good bait for these scavengers, so we can trap them and steal their stuff. That's worth a whole of a lot more than the pathetic taxes villagers would pay. That, and they provide us with a lot of manpower. If I am to become conqueror, many will perish under my command and will have to be replaced. Can't make an omelette without breaking a few thousand eggs. But I don't think I'll be aiming for continental conquest. It's far too much work. Besides, I didn't come here to change the Calradians' lives. I came here to get rich off of their misery, and my goals haven't changed. One thing did change, however. Because I'm now considered a legitimate ruler in these lands, I can no longer talk to some lord in private and make him pay tribute in order for me to stop my raids, as I've done in the past. If I want peace, I have to fight for it and then sign treaties. But why seek peace when war is so damn profitable? Anyway, we're done for today. No need for a recap. I've reached most of the goals I've set for myself when I embarked on this campaign. I have riches, I have family, and I'm even recognized as an upstart monarch in these lands. All I need now is to carve out a small kingdom for myself, and then I can rest. Before we say our farewells, however, I have a question for those of you who made it this far that I want answered in the comments. What exactly is it that you enjoy about my videos? I'd like to know so that I can double down on what makes my content entertaining and stop investing time and energy into things that nobody cares about. I'll make sure to address your answers in the next episode. Anyway, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next chapter. Goodbye for now.